As we've most recently seen mainly looking at Marvel movies, we know that everyone loves a bit of the multiverse. It's a very cool concept, the idea of there being so many infinite universes where there could be another us, maybe an even cooler us. In fact, most likely a much cooler us. But the point is that the multiverse doesn't start and end with Marvel. There's much more out there, and to that point, there's much better out there. So if Doctor Strange just isn't hitting the mark for you, then we've got you covered. I'm Amy from What Culture, and here are the 10 best multiverse movies ever. 10. Spiderman No Way Home. It is impossible to discuss multiverse movies without bringing up by far the most commercially successful and zeitgeist-grabbing of them all, the MCU's Spider-Man No Way Home. Whilst certainly not a perfect movie, No Way Home proved how the multiverse could be harnessed to deliver massively crowd-pleasing fan service by colliding 3 cinematic eras of Spider-Man into one single movie. The presences of Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield's Peter Parkers of course stole the show, though seeing the likes of Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin and Alfred Molina's Doc Ock in the mix was also a ton of fun. If introducing the multiverse to the MCU does feel a bit like opening Pandora's box, something the very messy Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness seemed to prove, at least No Way Home made good on its fan-serving promises. Beyond the obvious nostalgic appeal of seeing Maguire and Garfield back in these roles alongside Tom Holland's Spider-Man, it also gave the 2 former Spider-Men a chance to say goodbye to these characters after their respective runs ended, and we've got to be happy for them there at least. 9. Donnie Darko. Multiverse movies don't get much weirder than Donnie Darko, one of the definitive cult classics of the early 2000s, starring Jake Gyllenhaal as the titular teenager who narrowly avoids calamitous death before learning of a grim prophecy that the world will end in 28 days. Unlike most movies on the list, Donnie Darko doesn't hold your hand through its multiversal hooey. In fact, it kind of takes this a step further, enough that you really need to read an extra feature on the director's cut DVD, an excerpt from The Philosophy of Time Travel, a book featured in the film itself, to truly fathom what's going on. Even if you don't understand it entirely though, you'll probably feel Donnie Darko and appreciate its spectacularly weird, inventive take on both time travel and parallel universes. Armed with a small budget of just $4.5 million, debuting director Richard Kelly, who made the film at a mere 25 years of age, proved the possibilities of the multiverse movies on a smaller scale with no less intelligence or intrigue. 8. Star Trek 2009. J.J. Abrams made extremely clever use of the multiverse in his 2009 Star Trek reboot. Whilst most fans, pre-release, expected Abrams to give the flagging IP a full reboot, he ingeniously decided to set the movie in a parallel universe to the prime Star Trek universe, meaning that the adventures of the Enterprise's original crew still happened within this continuity. Better still, Abrams managed to have his cake and eat it too by having Spock end up in the alternate universe and help the alternate Captain Kirk vanquish the villainous Nero. By getting Spock to interact with the new Enterprise cast, and even Spock's own younger self, Trek 09 delivered giddy fan service in a clever and, at the time, wildly original way. That the multiverse aspect felt like an organic part of the story, the Kelvin timeline having been created by Nero after he travelled through a black hole and destroyed the USS Kelvin, thereby changing history, was just the icing on the cake. 7. The Last Action Hero. You won't often hear it referred to as a multiverse movie, but Arnold Schwarzenegger's gonzo cult classic action satire, The Last Hero, is totally a multiverse film. The movie revolves around a teenage boy called Danny Madigan, who, courtesy of a magic cinema ticket, is inadvertently transported into the world of his favourite action hero, Jack Slater. What follows is one of the most riotous, adventurous, and downright clever action films of the 90s, albeit one that was apparently too forward-thinking to be appreciated at its time. Beyond the fun conceit of Danny hanging out with Slater in Slater's own over-the-top action movie world, Last Action Hero indulges in some outrageous snake-swallowing-its-own-tail meta-ness, such as revealing that in Slater's world, Sylvester Stallone played the lead role in Terminator 2. To squeeze the most references out of this meta-concept, the film's villain Benedict also suggests he's going to use this magic ticket to bring the likes of Dracula, King Kong, Freddy Krueger, Hannibal Lecter, and Satan out of various movies, though luckily he's stopped before he's able to go through with it. As a film where every movie ever made is effectively its own universe, Last Action Hero was a truly original and ahead of its time take on the multiverse. 6. The One. Look, nobody's going to say that Jet Li's The One is a work of high art, but it is a ludicrously entertaining take on the multiverse concept, and one which feels rather prescient in retrospect. Back in 2001, long before cinema audiences were used to hearing the word multiverse, The One spoke it aloud. The film follows rogue multiverse authority agent Gabriel Yulor, who attempts to kill all 124 versions of himself across the multiverse in order to absorb their energies and become the titular, unstoppable, godlike entity. The final variant, Gabe Law, consequently vows to stop him, and so the obvious appeal of the movie lies in watching Jet Li face off against himself. It's a stupid good premise that the movie largely delivers on, even if this certainly isn't one of the more nuanced takes on the multiverse. It is simply a kick-ass action movie with a brilliant gimmick and a ridiculous nu metal soundtrack. Yeah, sure, the soundtrack does date the film very obviously, but today it's kind of charming. 5. Source Code. Duncan Jones's Source Code is one of the most original sci-fi movies of the 2010s, a thrilling, secret multiverse movie in which US Army Captain Colter Stevens is tasked with repeatedly entering a digital simulation of a train bombing in order to discover the bomber's identity. Now, for the bulk of Source Code's runtime, we don't actually know that we're watching a multiverse movie, because it's only later revealed that the simulations are, in fact, parallel universes created by their experimental titular machine. Source Code is at once a fast-paced time loop movie, a rip-roaring Hitchcockian suspense picture, and a provocative existential sci-fi flick, all of them being superbly executed. While the universes we see throughout the film aren't particularly adventurous as far as multiverses go, much of the fun lies in the tiny variations between Stevens' different runs through the bombing scenario. It's incredibly different from Marvel in that aspect, but it's nice to note that multiverses don't need to be flashy in order to be entertaining. 4. Run Lola Run. Somehow making Donnie Darko seem comparatively well-budgeted, 1998's German experimental thriller Run Lola Run was made for just $1.75 million, yet offers up a brilliantly energetic take on the notion of the parallel universe. The story follows Lola, who has just 20 minutes to come up with 100,000 Deutschmarks or her low-level criminal boyfriend Manny will be killed. Director Tom Tykwer chronicles 3 separate attempts by Lola to save Manny, each distinguished by minor variations which end up causing wildly different and often fatal outcomes. Tykwer doesn't linger much on the metaphysical machinations of the situation, but rather revels in the beauty of the butterfly effect, demonstrating it perfectly in each high-tension, fast-paced 20-minute sprint. It begs audiences to consider how their lives could branch off in aggressively divergent directions with just a minor change, and that you never know which moment in your life might be a major nexus point for the future. 3. Coherence. And now we get to outdo both Donnie Darko and Run Lola Run on the budgetary front by bringing you Coherence, which was made on a budget of just $50,000. Coherence follows a woman, M, who begins to encounter strange occurrences whilst attending a dinner party with friends on the night that a comet passes overhead. It's best going into the film whilst knowing very little about it, but basically the film's conceit revolves around the notion of dueling universes and the utter chaos it causes for a group of unsuspecting people. It may not be the most visually remarkable film you've ever seen, but the brain-melting ideas it presents about the multiverse more than compensate for the lo-fi production. As surreal as it is ultimately terrifying, this is a singular take on the cosmically horrific potential of an actual multiverse scenario. 2. Everything Everywhere All at Once. Multiverse movies are all the rage at the moment, and whilst the Marvel Cinematic Universe has inarguably cornered the market on mega-budget, universe-hopping fare, they've been categorically outdone on a quality standpoint by a new movie made on a fraction of the budget. It follows Chinese-American laundromat owner Evelyn Wang, who's suddenly charged with saving the multiverse from a malevolent threat by slingshotting her consciousness into other universes, acquiring her alternate self's skills and then using said skills to battle her enemies. Everything Everywhere All at Once is a frantically paced, hilarious and totally insane film that somehow manages to balance out its surreal, absurdist action with genuinely heartfelt character-driven drama. At once shamelessly silly and totally earnest, this mesmerizing film tackles the multiverse with peerless levels of imagination, and hopefully the Academy won't forget about it next year. 1. Spider-Man Into the Spiderverse. Spider-Man Into the Spiderverse was the movie that preempted the MCU in introducing mainstream audiences to the multiverse, and it basically proved to Marvel Studios just how lucrative that could be. Refreshingly led by Miles Morales' version of Spider-Man, this Oscar-winning film was one of the most visually stunning and dynamic animated films of all time, seamlessly blending disparate styles into an exciting and impressively coherent whole. Though for most, of course, the true joy lies in witnessing a bevy of diverse Spider-Man iterations team up, including more traditional Peter Parkers voiced by Jake Johnson and Chris Pine, Gwen Stacy's Spider-Woman, the fantastic Spider-Ham, Penny Parker, and Spider-Man Noir. The result is a film that acutely understands the playful potential of multiversal stories, and manages to fold its surrealist style into an emotionally engaging whole. Truly, it's an all-timer as animated movies, superheroes, and indeed multiverse movies go. And on that note, we've reached the end of this list of the 10 best multiverse movies ever. Were there any others that you would have put on this list instead? Let us know in the comments below. And check out whatculture.com for more lists and articles like this every single day. As always, I've been Amy from What Culture, and I'll catch you next time.